She was already one of the best wheelchair racers in the world at shorter distances and had no desire to do a full marathon. Her coach, though, had other ideas, and after 2 years of his urging, she finally relented. The Chicago Marathon turned out to be just as brutal as she'd feared. Still, she finished with a BQ, so even though she had thought she would be a one and done type, as far as the marathon was concerned, she agreed to do Boston as a victory lap. She showed up in Hopkinton, Massachusetts the following April, ready to race what she had insisted would be her last marathon. 1 hour, 43 minutes, and 17 seconds later, she broke the tape in a new women's world best and again had a change of heart. Instead of marking the end of a brief marathoning career, that race was just the beginning. For the next 6 years, every Patriots Day ended in another Boston win until she became the first athlete in history to win that race 7 consecutive times. Her marathoning career lasted a full decade and was bookended by her first and eighth wins at the Boston Marathon. Turns out she was a marathoner after all, competing in that distance at multiple Paralympic Games and winning 12 medals for Team USA across all events. Today is Monday, August 25th, 2025, and on this day in 1996, American wheelchair racer Jean Driscoll won gold at the T52-53 marathon at the Atlanta Paralympics. In this episode, we'll hear directly from Jean herself about how she got into athletics, her incredible career as one of the most decorated American wheelchair racers of all time, and what she's been up to in the 25 years since retiring. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and you are listening to Today in Running History. I am so excited to share with y'all the recent conversation I had with Jean Driscoll, but before I get to that, I wanted to take a minute to talk about wheelchair racing and the Paralympics in general, because in my personal experience, it is not something the average person is well versed in. And honestly, until I began running world marathon majors that have wheelchair divisions and attending really large track meets like Prix that have para-athlete divisions, it was not something I was very familiar with myself. So, in order to be eligible to compete in para-athletics in the first place, the athlete must have an eligible impairment and meet a certain criteria set by World Para-Athletics. There are 10 eligible impairment types, 8 of which are physical, 1 is vision impairment, and 1 is intellectual impairment. And then within those impairment types, there are further classifications to account for smaller differences between athletes. For example, I am a huge fan of both Ezra Fretch and Hunter Woodall. In addition to being gorgeous, both men are Paralympic gold medalist sprinters with a limb difference. But because Fretch uses 1 prosthetic blade and Woodall uses 2, they are in different classifications, T63 and T62 respectively. 2 athletes I follow on the women's side are Kim Crosby and Katarina Guimares, who are both sprinters but compete under different classifications. Crosby has albinism and is legally blind, so she runs under T13, which is for vision impairment. And then Guimares has cerebral palsy and competes under the T38 classification, which is for coordination impairments. Now let's talk about wheelchair racing. There are 7 different classifications, and they are based on coordination or muscle impairments, limb deficiency, and leg length differences. Jean Driscoll, who we'll be talking with momentarily, was born with spina bifida and before retiring raced under the T52, 53, or 54 classifications. This is the same class as many of the biggest wheelchair racers of today, such as Daniel Romanchuk, Marcel Hug, who I mispronounced his last name as Hug during the upcoming interview, and Susanna Scaroni. But also within wheelchair racing, there are athletes like Peter Jenin, who broke his neck as a teenager, which resulted in tetraplegia and competes in the T51 classification, and Ahmad Al-Mutari, who has cerebral palsy with very limited movement below the waist and competes in the T33 classification. I really urge y'all to watch the upcoming World Para-Athletics Championships, which will be in New Delhi the week after World Champs in Tokyo. I can talk all about classifications and how badass these athletes are, but just like with events like the steeplechase or pole vault, it's hard to truly comprehend without seeing it for yourself. Now, without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Jean Driscoll to Today in Running History. All right, I have Jean Driscoll here 5-time gold medalist at the Paralympics and 8-time Boston Marathon champion. How are you doing, Jean?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, you have quite a list of accolades. So today we will talk a little bit about the 1996 Paralympic Marathon, but want to hear all about your entire career. Can you tell us how you got started in athletics to begin with?
I was born with spina bifida, and it is a disability that affects the strength in the lower body. And so I walked with below the knee braces. And my freshman year in high school, I was in a bike accident. I just turned too sharp around a corner coming home from a babysitting job, fell on my hip, and my hip dislocated because of the weak lower body musculature. So I spent a year in a body cast, had 5 major hip operations, and after all of that, started walking on crutches and using a wheelchair. I transferred high schools my junior year, and there was another guy with spina bifida who used a wheelchair there and invited me to a wheelchair soccer practice. And I just thought it was going to be hokey and not real sport. And so I declined the entire school year. And finally, in May of my junior year, I thought the only way I'm going to get this guy off my back is to go to this practice. I know I'm not going to like it. And I got there, cheers are crashing and banging, bodies are flying, and I got hooked. It opened the door to every wheelchair sport you can think of. I did wheelchair football, softball, basketball. There's even wheelchair square dancing.
Oh,
And
wow.
when you
That's
swing
great.
your partner, you get really good speed going.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, in Milwaukee, where I grew up, there was a friend of mine in the wheelchair sports world who had made a racing chair out of PVC piping, and he let me try it out in a road race in Milwaukee. And that kind of was my start. And from there, eventually, I attended the University of Illinois, not only played wheelchair basketball, but got involved in wheelchair track and road racing. And that's kind of how it all came to be.
Wow. So your first time at the Paralympics, that was in Seoul.
Yes, Seoul, 1988.
And what was
I
that like?
um It was an eye-opening experience. I had never been to Asia, and it's the first time that I saw people with disabilities begging. We went to this shopping area called Itaewon. I had shoes made. I had a rain outfit made. You could go there and get measured for custom fit clothing. But it just is where everybody hung out, a shopping district. And I remember seeing a woman in rubber waders singing as she crawled down the sidewalk pushing a cup. And then on the opposite side of the street, there was a younger man who was a double amputee sitting, singing karaoke, and he had his cup out. And so I was really surprised by this. Again, I had never seen that. But that was my first impression of outside athletics. On the inside of the track, it was very exciting. Seoul, South Korea crowds were excellent for the Paralympic Games. There were some international athletes that I knew who came over to the US for some road races, but a lot of them were new. And I was pretty excited to be racing against the best people in the world.
That's great. And you ended up with your first gold medal from that one.
Yes, I did. I had 1 gold, 1 silver, and 2 bronze, and it was a surprise that I even medaled. I had no idea what was to come in my career, but it just was a really solid first Paralympic experience.
That's great. And then the next year is when you got into marathoning. What did that look like?
Well, my racing coach, Marty Morse, had been trying to talk me into doing a marathon for 2 years. And I thought, who wants to do a marathon? I did not.
Fair.
But just like that kid in school, I thought the only way I'm going to get coach off my back is to do a marathon. So I'll do one marathon. I started training for the Chicago Marathon. All of a sudden, workouts were twice as long. And I did not enjoy that. I did not like that. I couldn't wait for the Chicago Marathon to be over. But I went up to Chicago, and the night before, I couldn't sleep. I was so nervous. But sitting on the starting line, I looked at the people who were at the starting line, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try for third place. My training partner was Ann Cody. She was creaming me in workouts. I could probably stay in her draft for the first 2 miles while we would train on the flatlands of Champaign, but then she was gone. So my goal was to stay in her draft as long as possible. And I should say in wheelchair racing, just like in cycling, we don't have gears on our racing chairs, but we do utilize the tactic drafting. And so there is up to a 30% difference in the amount of protection you get behind a racing chair is when you are up front pulling. So
Wow.
there's an unwritten rule in wheelchair racing that if you sit in the draft, you better well take a turn up front as well. So I was taking my turn with the drafting pack, and much to my surprise, I was able to stay with everybody until mile 20. And then I got dropped, but then I was telling myself, I only have 6.2 miles left. I like 10Ks. In fact, I love 10Ks. That's my favorite distance. But the last 10K was into a headwind along Lake Michigan. By the time I got to the finish line, my hands were blistered and raw and bleeding. I bled through my gloves. My coach Marty came up to me afterward and said, Jean, do you realize what you just did? And I said, Marty, you were right. I made it through the marathon. I came across the finish line. And he said, you finished 7 seconds under. 2 hours you qualified to do the Boston Marathon. And immediately I was like, no way, no way, no way. You can't argue with your coach, especially after the race. But I, I did not want to do another marathon. I did not realize that I'd qualified for Boston, but I had no idea what life was going to be like after that.
And Boston was a whole new chapter in your racing career. So that first Boston Marathon, that was only what, like 6 months later.
Yep, it was April of 1990. Our women's wheelchair basketball team for the University of Illinois had beaten the perennial champions, Minnesota. We were national champions, and 10 days later, I was competing in the Boston Marathon. I wanted to revel in the excitement of being a national champion in basketball, and here I was in the Boston Marathon. Our team had done a course drive-through of the marathon the day before. I saw all the hills. Anybody who's ever been to East Central Illinois, Champaign, Illinois, knows that the ground is as flat as any floor you've ever seen. So I was really nervous about the hills. Sitting on the starting line of my first Boston Marathon, I was yelling at my coach under my breath. I didn't think I belonged in the race. I couldn't understand how the strength training and the overpass repeats that we did would feed into my preparation for Boston. And then we would do headwind time trials as well. All I could see were the hills, and I just was so scared. And the most incredible thing, 26.2 miles later, not only did I win my first Boston Marathon, but I broke the world record.
That's amazing. I cannot
Yeah,
even
it was.
imagine
It was.
not having that even as a possibility in your mind. And then you end up winning Boston, setting a world record, and beginning quite a streak because that was
Yes.
not your last Boston Marathon, and that was not your last Boston Marathon win. So you went on to win seven more times. So the tied for the most wins of anyone ever in 130 years of this race. That's pretty amazing. What was it like just each year? Was there more pressure on yourself? Was it exciting? Did you get used to it? What did it feel like going year after year, knowing that you were the reigning champion and you had this streak to keep alive?
In my opinion, my racing coach, Marty Morse, was the best in the world. And being at the University of Illinois, we were the most fit guinea pigs in the world. We had students and faculty in biomechanics and in kinesiology, exercise physiology, coming and doing research with us. I can't even tell you how many times our VO2 max was tested. And Marty himself had a spinal cord injury and would get out into a racing chair and push. And he was a research scientist, and so developed a different stroke for us, and then helped develop different gloves. And so he was part of the growth of the sport, the evolution of the sport and the equipment. And so every year that I went back to Boston was an opportunity to try out a new pushing technique or new gloves, and the times just kept dropping and dropping. I will say, after the first time I won Boston in 1990, I went back in 91 and thought the previous year was a fluke. I thought I won last year, but my teammate Ann is going to win this year because she kept creaming me in workouts. And what I didn't realize was she was a master on the flat courses and I was a master of the hills. And my strength to weight ratio was incredible. I had a max bench press of 210 pounds. Now I'm 4'11, I weighed 112 pounds, and I could put up 210 pounds. And that's why I could climb the hills better than anybody in the world. So going back every year was very exciting. But when you go back as a champion and you are expected to win, there is a lot of pressure. After the first 7 consecutive wins, 5 of which were a new world record the first 5 years, in 1997, my wheel slipped into a trolley track and I crashed. So I was stopped for quite a while, but I still hung on to second place. And then
Wow.
the next year in 1998, Louis Savage, who was my main rival, outsprinted me and beat me by like 2/10 of a second. That is still the hardest loss of my career. I still cringe when I think about that loss. And then the next year in 99, Louise outsprinted me by half a second at the finish line. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. So in 2000, I went into the Boston Marathon knowing that I was going to be retiring after the 2000 Paralympic Games. It was going to be my last year. I so badly wanted to win number 8. I would become the first person in the history of the Boston Marathon in any division to win it 8 times. I had such a hunger and a fire. And because I had lost 3 straight years, nobody was, the pressure for winning and being a champion was gone because nobody was expecting that I was going to win. My best years were behind me. And then in 2000, I won my 8th Boston Marathon. It was as exciting as that first win. And I'm still in awe of everything that happened. Boston just is still a very, very special place to me.
That's amazing. What was it like last year with Marcel Hug tying the record of 8?
Well, every year when the Boston Marathon is happening, I am in very close touch with my coach, Marty Morse. He's now retired, and I lead fundraising in our College of Applied Health Sciences at the University of Illinois. And I knew Marcel Hug was attempting to win number 8. Ernst van Dijk has won 10 in the men's wheelchair division. And I actually am excited when the boundaries are pushed in our sport of wheelchair racing. So when Marcel came across the finish line, I really was excited for him. And I'm excited for the sport because new boundaries keep getting pushed and new stories are being written, new records are being broken, and I hope it continues.
That's awesome. That's such a good perspective of it. I can't imagine that because I've never set any record besides personal records. But I can imagine it would be cool to see people do it, but then also, it's always good to know that you were the first, and that's pretty awesome. Now Boston was one thing, and then your Paralympic career also continued after those first games in Seoul. So 1992, went to what is that, Barcelona, and then in 96, so exactly as of air date, exactly 39 years, or no, 29 years ago, um, in Atlanta, the marathon. And what was that race like?
The 96 Paralympic Games were really special. I enjoyed the 2000 Paralympic Games in Sydney as well, but when you get to compete in your own home country, there is nothing like it. Your American flag is the dominant flag in the stands. The crowd is excited about American athletes, and it rained part of the time while we were competing, and it was incredibly humid. The marathon was the last event of that week. I had done and won medals in 3 track events prior to that. But the marathon, I knew it was going to be a hilly course. And because it was in the USA, I really, really wanted to win it. Truth be told, I want to win every one of my races. Who am I kidding?
Yeah.
I grew up one of 5 kids. I was the second oldest and the shortest, and we were always competing with each other. So I have always had this competitive fire. But in Atlanta, I really wanted to win that race. And during the first part of it, there was a good group of us together. Louis Sauvage was one of the people. Who was competing in that event. But when we started climbing bridges, I was able to get away from everybody. But I remember it was really humid. And we have gloves that we wear on our hands. We don't grab the push rim, we punch the push rim. And the best way I can help people understand how we propel our chairs, when you were younger and you turned your bike on its handlebars, you would try to get that front wheel going sometimes, and you would just keep fanning it and try to get it go faster and faster. That's kind of what we do, only we are putting all the power of our upper bodies into these push rims that are moving these wheels. And we are just fanning that push rim to get the wheels going as fast as possible. Because we're not grabbing our wheels, and the humidity creates moisture in the air, our push rims would get moist. And so we would slip a lot. We slip when it's raining and we slip when it's humid. We do use Clister, which is similar to what skiers use on the bottom of their skis to tack to the snow. And we just dab our gloves a little bit in that, and it does give us some traction on our push rim. But if you put too much Clister on, then you stick to the push rim. So
Is that like
there's
a
kind of
wax or sorry, I haven't really skied,
it's
so
similar to a wax, but
okay.
it's a sticky substance
Okay.
that allows you to tack to your push rims. But if you put too much on, then it's really hard to get your gloves off the push rim, and you're wasting strength trying to get your gloves off the push rim. So there's a fine line between having enough and not having enough. But anyway, I was slipping, but the Clister helped enough that I was able to motor up and down the hills enough to get away from the other athletes and win the gold medal in Atlanta. So that's a really special memory. That marathon hurt because of all the bridges and all the hills, but it was such a great way to end my home Paralympic experience by winning the marathon.
That's so amazing. And then you went back the next one. So in Sydney, you mentioned that a little bit. And that was your final Paralympics. What was that experience like?
Sydney, although I'm very focused when I'm competing, I also was trying to take in as much as I could just from a memory standpoint. Um, Sydney was really well hosted. The fans were warm and welcoming. And this was Louise Savage's home country. So in 96, she came to my home country for a Paralympic Games. And then in 2000, I went to her home country for a Paralympic Games. And again, the marathon was the last event of the Games. And it was supposed to be, there are other women wheelchair athletes who are competitive, but really, Louise and I were trading victories a lot in the marathons when we were competing against one another. And so the Sydney Paralympic Organizing Committee was banking on a Louise Savage victory in her home country. But she acquired an injury during the latter part of the games and dropped out of the marathon. But Wakako Tsushita from Japan was pushing very, very well and was in the hunt in all of the events as well as the Sydney Marathon. And we were neck and neck coming into the stadium for the final 400 or 500 meters. And she was right there in the final sprint, but I came out from behind her draft and out sprinted her to gold in that final stretch. And I really consider it a gift that I got that gold medal. One of my fondest memories is that the women's wheelchair marathon was the final medal ceremony before the closing ceremony. And so
Wow.
I got the last gold medal given in Sydney before the closing ceremonies. That's really special.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Now you have a lot of wins, as well as a lot of second and third place victories as well. So there is a lot of races to compare. This is gonna be a really tough question, but which race, if you had to just pick one, was the most special of all of them?
Boston and the Paralympic Games, or
Every single race.
the
I know.
Boston Marathon will always, always, always be my favorite.
Which
Uh,
one?
um, oh my gosh, that first one was such a surprise. The last one was such a relief. Um, In 1994, I have to say that was my fastest. I ran 1 hour, 34 minutes and 22 seconds. It's the last time I set a course in world best time. I was so strong. I just knew I was going to be the first female wheelchair athlete to break a 90-minute marathon. And a couple days before the race, I was down on the South Shore with a bunch of my coach's family. He's from the South Shore. He grew up in Hanover, and we were with his family, and we went to a restaurant. Um, Half of us got food poisoning. There was an old vat of clam chowder and a new vat of clam
Oh
chowder.
gosh.
And those of us who got clam chowder from the old vat got food poisoning. I think 8 out of 14 of us got food poisoning. And so it knocked the strength out of me. And I could tell Monday morning, just warming up in Hopkinton, that it had taken something out of me. And I got sick 3 different times on the course. Somehow I hung on and I won my fifth Boston Marathon and I set the new world best time of 1 hour, 34 minutes and 22 seconds. But at the same time, I was like, I could have gone sub 90 minutes and didn't get that opportunity because I was sick. So it is a great memory because of the time I ran, but also it's a difficult memory because I have that what if,
Yeah.
swimming around in my head. But I just am grateful for the health that I did have, the strength that I did have. The Boston Athletic Association always treated us with such distinction and respect, and celebrated our victories along with all the other champions in the different divisions. And I still look back on that with appreciation and fondness.
That's awesome. That's so great. What would be something that would surprise people about wheelchair racing?
A lot of people, I don't know if this would surprise them, but a lot of people don't really understand the difference between wheelchair racing and hand cycling. A hand cycle is a bike that you crank with your arms, and there's a separate division for hand cycling. Hand cycling is akin to cycling for somebody without a disability. And it's the bikes are geared so you can move up and down into different gears depending on if you are on flat or uphill or downhill. The racing chairs do not have gears, and it is even though wheels are more efficient than legs when you are running, there are no gears. And so you're just using whatever size push rim you have on your wheels to propel yourself across a course. Certainly, if you have gears, it's an advantage. I rode a bike before my bike accident, and I had a hand cycle after my bike accident. And when there was a really good tailwind or a downhill, you put it in the biggest gear and you just fly. It's so much fun. In a racing chair, you can only keep up with the rims so long. And when you start going downhill, there's a point at which you get into a tuck so that you're as aerodynamic as possible going down the hill. You can't just keep going. And so I think that's important for people to understand the difference between the hand cycles and the racing chairs, and that's why they are different divisions.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't really thought about the gear portion of that. Oh, that sounds terrifying going down a hill. Oh my goodness. It sounds terrifying with either one of those. Like I don't ride bikes. Like I've gotten on my son's bike a few times to try to like help him learn, but if I went to the top of a hill, like that just is is terrifying to me.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, it's funny you say that because after a long winter of training on rollers, similar to what cyclists do, I would go out to Boston 10 days early and I would stay with my coach's brother and sister-in-law in Cohasset and train at Wampatuck State Park. They've got a really long, fast downhill, and when you turn around, it's a long, slow climb, but you could get in excess of 30 miles an hour going down that hill. And I would have to get used to going fast down that hill. And I would do that in Wampatuck. Now, some of the other male and female competitors would go even faster than that down hills. I had people that I knew who lived and worked out in Seattle and routinely would go in excess of 50 miles an hour down those hills. That I would have my brake on. I
Oh
would
my
be too
goodness.
scared to do that. But the fastest I've ever gone downhill in the Boston Marathon was 36 and a half miles an hour, and that was frightening.
Yeah, that just blows my mind.
But the men
Terrifies
would go
me.
in excess of 40 miles an hour, and I just don't know how they did that.
Yeah, wow. That's pretty incredible. Now, you mentioned that you retired from professional racing after the Sydney Paralympics. What does your relationship look like these days with racing?
I am a fan. Daniel Romanchuk and Susanna Scaroni train here in Champaign, Illinois, at the University of Illinois. And there are other wheelchair athletes who train here too. Those are probably names with whom most people would be familiar.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to continue cheering and watching them go faster and push the limits. Susanna's going way faster than I am when I was competing. And the gloves are very different. And the chair technology, the wheel technology is different from when I was competing. And so it's fun to see how fast the men and women are going now versus 25 years ago when I was competing. And it's so hard to believe that my last race was in 2000 and that was 25 years ago. It seems like maybe 10 years ago, not 25 years ago. Time goes very fast.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and I love watching Susanna, and it's insane. It always blows my mind how fast she can turn around. She can win and then turn around, fly across the world, and then win again. Like it's just
I know.
amazing.
They're all doing that these days. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Last question is about the 26.2 Foundation. Can you tell us about that and about your role on the board?
I am brand new to the board. I will attend my first meeting later this month. I remember when Tim Kilduff was on that truck ahead of the women's wheelchair division, reporting splits and doing reports for TV and radio. And so I'm really honored that he reached out to me as the executive director of the 26.2 Foundation and invited me to be on the board. I really like what they want to do, the new marathon center that for which everyone is fundraising is going to be incredible, and it's something that will serve as a milestone to a global marathon movement. It'll be something that more people are going to want to be part of as it comes to fruition. I'm just really excited to be part of that.
That's awesome, and I'm grateful to them for helping me get in contact with you and so much of what they're doing in Hopkinton and beyond. So very excited about that. I'll put some more information on the foundation in the description of the episode for anybody who is interested. Well, Jean, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for joining today in Running History.
Thank you, Hillary.
Wow, what a great conversation. And I am so thankful to the 26.2 Foundation for helping me get in touch with Jean. And then, of course, a huge thank you to Jean herself for being my guest on the pod. Thank you all for listening. Once again, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on alerts, rate me 5 stars, post in your Instagram story and tag me, and then tune in tomorrow for a conversation with my fellow Hillary, who just happens to be a professional runner for Brooks, who's getting ready for World Trail Running Championships. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and this has been Today in Running History. Intro here. Okay. And honestly, I began gold medal sprintles, medal sprinter. Why can't I say the word sprinter? Why is that hard? Okay. All right, then here's the interview. Hey, Jean. Oh, hi. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm really great. Okay. There was the interview.